In early February 2023, Google CEO Sundar Pichai introduced Bard, the company's answer to ChatGPT, calling it a launchpad for curiosity that could simplify complex topics. Google had spent years building the underlying language model technology. It employed more AI researchers and controlled more compute power than nearly any competitor. Within 24 hours of that announcement, Alphabet lost $100 billion in market value, not because of a competitor, not because of a market crash, because of a single wrong answer about a telescope. To understand how Google ended up here, you have to go back a few months. In late November 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT. Within 5 days, it had 1 million users. Within 2 months, it had 100 million. By some estimates, the fastest growing consumer application in history. Microsoft, which had invested billions in OpenAI, moved quickly to integrate ChatGPT into Bing, its long-struggling search engine. For the first time in over a decade, someone was threatening Google's core business: search. Google had actually been sitting on the technology. Its research division had published the foundational Transformer paper back in 2017, the very architecture that powered ChatGPT. The company had built LaMDA, a large language model capable of open-ended conversation, and had demonstrated it internally. But Google had held back from a public release, wary of the reputational risks of a chatbot that could hallucinate, generate confident-sounding answers that were completely false. Then ChatGPT changed the calculus. Reports surfaced that Google had issued a code red internally. The company that had invented the Transformer was now scrambling to catch up to a startup that had built on top of it. Google announced Bard on February 6, 2023, in a blog post from Pichai. The product would use a lightweight version of LaMDA to generate conversational responses to user queries. The pitch was clear. Bard would do what ChatGPT did, but with Google's vast knowledge infrastructure behind it. The next day, Google ran a promotional ad on Twitter. It was a short GIF showing Bard in action. The prompt asked, "What new discoveries from the James Webb Space Telescope can I tell my 9-year-old about?" Bard produced several bullet points. One of them claimed the James Webb Space Telescope took the very first pictures of exoplanets, planets orbiting stars outside our solar system. That was wrong. The first direct image of an exoplanet was captured by the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope in 2004, nearly 2 decades before the James Webb Telescope launched. It was exactly the kind of hallucination Google had been afraid of, and it happened not buried in some user session, but in Google's own marketing material. Astronomers spotted the error almost immediately. Grant Tremblay, an astrophysicist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, pointed it out on Twitter within hours. The correction spread fast. On February 8th, the day of a live Bard demo event in Paris, Alphabet stock dropped roughly 9%. $100 billion in market value, gone in a single trading session. The Paris event itself felt rushed. Reporters noted that the presentation was thin on detail and ended abruptly. Reuters described it as underwhelming. Meanwhile, Microsoft held its own event the same week, showcasing ChatGPT's integration into Bing with a polished, confident presentation. The contrast was brutal. Google had delayed releasing conversational AI specifically because it feared inaccurate outputs. When competitive pressure finally forced its hand, the company rushed out a demo that contained exactly the kind of error it had been trying to avoid. And it apparently hadn't fact-checked the promotional material. For a product whose entire selling point was providing reliable information, Bard launched publicly in March 2023 to lukewarm reviews. Users found it less capable than ChatGPT in most tasks. It struggled with coding problems, gave vague answers, and lacked the ecosystem of integrations that OpenAI was rapidly building. Google iterated. It upgraded Bard from LaMDA to PaLM 2, then later to Gemini. By early 2024, Google retired the Bard name entirely and rebranded the product as Gemini. The name Bard, associated from birth with a factual error and a $100 billion stock drop, was quietly buried. Google's AI efforts have since recovered. Gemini is now integrated across Google's product suite, and Alphabet's stock price climbed back. But the Bard launch remains a case study in what happens when competitive panic overrides quality control. Google had the talent, the research, and the infrastructure. It had years of head start on the underlying technology. What it didn't have was a few extra days of fact-checking on a promotional GIF. The Bard episode demonstrated that for products built on generating text, a single hallucination in the wrong context could cost more than most companies earn in a year. OpenAI and other competitors began investing more heavily in accuracy benchmarks and citation features, partly because Google's mistake had shown the financial stakes so clearly. Google killed the Bard brand less than a year after launching it. The technology survived under a new name, but Bard itself became shorthand for a specific kind of failure. Not a failure of engineering, but a failure of process. The model wasn't ready, the demo wasn't checked, and so the question worth sitting with is this. What does it mean when a company with over 15 years of dominance in search lets a startup dictate its timeline? If that question interests you, subscribe. We break down more stories like this every week. Subscribe for more stories about the people, companies, and ideas that shaped modern technology.